Hey, thanks for tuning in to my first video. Today I'll be going over the steps of how to make kimchi. It's a fermented napa cabbage dish that originates from Korea. And if you'd like to know the exact amounts of the ingredients that I did use, I'll leave them down in the description below. So to start, we'll make a small cut on the bottom of our napa cabbage. The reason why we don't want to cut the napa cabbage all the way through is so that the leaves remain intact. We want to use our fingers to pry the two halves apart, and if your napa cabbage is too large, what you can do is the exact same process and make quarters rather than halves. So our next step is to brine our napa cabbage. What we want to do is sprinkle some salt in between each individual leaf, and what this will do is draw out water and moisture as well as kill bacteria. I'm using pickling salt, coarse pickling salt, but you can use whatever salt you have on hand. To further brine our napa cabbage, we want to make a salt water mixture, and this we'll be using to pour over our cabbage. Here we're pouring our salt water mixture over the napa cabbage and making sure it's evenly distributed. Make sure that you have a large enough bowl to contain all of your napa cabbage. I like to leave my napa cabbage to brine overnight. You can leave it to brine anywhere in between 4 to 8 hours. Just make sure it's not brining for too long. Now, after letting it brine for a couple hours, we want to just rinse the napa cabbage of all the excess salt. Once the excess salt is all washed off, your leaves should look like these. If you tear some off and take a bite, you should be able to hear a sound similar to this. Now we'll move on to making porridge, and this porridge is something that helps speed up fermentation. This step is completely optional. What we're going to do is add 3 tablespoons of sweet rice flour into 1.5 cups of water and simmer. As we're waiting for our porridge to cool, we'll prepare our vegetables and aromats for our paste. Let's start by preparing our garlic. We want to be slicing the very ends of our garlic. That way we get rid of some of that bitter flavoring. Take your ginger, make sure it's peeled, and then chop it up into rough pieces so that it's easier to grind up in our food processor. Cut our onion in half. Make sure that the roots remain intact, and you want to be going through the roots so that it's easier to dice. After that, we want to be peeling our outer layer of the onion so that the onion that we are using is firm and crisp. We want to be making horizontal slices towards the root and then turn the onion 90 degrees, make vertical cuts down towards your cutting board, and then finish off by turning the onion again by 90 degrees and just slicing through. When you're initially slicing your onion, try not to cut through your onion root. That way everything remains intact. It just makes it a lot easier to dice your onion. Now for this next part, it helps a lot to have a sharp knife. We want to be slicing our daikon into 1/2-inch discs so that we can julienne those. We are also going to be slicing our daikon into 2-inch discs so that we can blitz it into our paste. With the 2-inch discs, again, make some rough cuts so that we can throw these into our food processor. With the thinly sliced discs, we want to line them up and julienne them. Set the julienne daikon aside so that we can mix them with the rest of the paste. Now with your green onions, just chop off the very ends, and then after that start making large diagonal slices, roughly 3 inches in size. Now that we've prepared everything, we can start loading up our food processor with the large daikon pieces, onions, and garlic and ginger. An optional step would also be to add some sort of fruit such as apples or Asian pears, but I normally don't add any. To aid in the blitzing, we can add the sweet rice porridge, which is now cooled off. Once everything is fully blitzed, we can pour everything into a large bowl and add in our green onions, our daikon. If you have carrots, you can add in your julienned carrots. And then we'll be adding our fermented shrimp paste as well as our salt and Gochugaru, so the dried red pepper flakes. And another optional ingredient would be the fish sauce. A lot of people use fish sauce, but personally I don't really enjoy the taste, so I leave that out. Now at this point, I've also seen a lot of recipes call for sugar. My family has never really used any sugar before, and if we do add sugar, we add very little. So I typically just leave out sugar altogether. Now that everything is added to the large bowl, we want to mix thoroughly so that the seasoning is even throughout our paste. Make sure you taste your paste, see if you like it. If not, you can add some more garlic in if you think you need garlic, or more salt in if you need salt. This is where you want to be tasting your food before moving on to the next step. Now that our paste is fully mixed, what we can do is grab our napa cabbage and fill in the leaves with our paste. We don't need to rub the whole leaf with a lot of paste. What ends up happening is once all of the kimchi is sitting in the container, a lot of the juices just kind of flow everywhere and coats everything with flavor. But at the same time, we want to give a good rub on each of the leaves. As you're applying paste to your napa cabbage, make sure that you already have your container that you're going to store the kimchi in ready to go. That way you won't be fumbling around looking for it. And as soon as you're done coating each of the leaves with some paste, you can place the finished kimchi into the bin. There's a point that I really want to emphasize. Do not add vinegar to your kimchi. If you add vinegar into the paste, or if you add vinegar into your kimchi at the very end, what happens is it makes it really difficult for the bacteria to grow, and as a result, this good bacteria that causes fermentation is unable to actually age your kimchi. As you're placing the kimchi into the bin, make sure that you're packing it down really tightly and push down on it. Like it's not that fragile, so you can apply a lot of force. I've also actually left big chunks of daikon, and I'm just gonna stuff these in between each of the layers of kimchi so that they can ferment in the kimchi juice. When placing the kimchi into the container, make sure that the inside of the leaves are facing up. That way the paste and everything that you put into the cabbage leaves are not going to spill out. Now we add cling wrap to the top of our container and then close the lid. After closing the lid, we leave our container out at 19 degrees Celsius for roughly 1 day. And then if you didn't use the sweet rice porridge, leave it out for 3 days. After you've fermented for 1 or 3 days, we put the container into the fridge, and during the time that it's in the fridge, it still continues to ferment. It's just a lot slower. So now that we're done making our kimchi, we can leave it to ferment in the fridge, or if you want, you can eat it right away. Basically, if you ferment it, it opens up a lot of options as to what you can use it for. So right off the top of my head, you can make kimchi stew. You can also make kimchi fried rice. There are so many other dishes that you can actually make with kimchi, and it's quite versatile. Well, I hope you enjoyed my first video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content.